Africa's new scramble, how the world is competing for the continent again. In the late 1800s, European powers carved Africa into pieces. They called it the Scramble for Africa. Back then, the goal was clear. Control the land, control the people, control the wealth. A century later, the borders they drew still shape the continent, sometimes violently, often unfairly. But today, something new is happening. Another scramble. Only this time, it's not about territory or empires. It's about influence, resources, and the future of global power. China, the United States, Russia, Europe, and rising powers from the global south all are competing for Africa's partnership, its resources, and its rapidly growing markets. The old scramble was about domination. This new one is about persuasion and control in subtler forms. So is Africa being colonized again, or is the continent finally writing its own rules? This is Horizon Africa, and today, we're explaining Africa beyond the headlines. To understand this new competition, we need to go back all the way to 1884, when the Berlin Conference divided Africa like a pie, without a single African voice in the room. That decision created borders that ignored languages, tribes, and cultures, separating brothers, uniting rivals, and planting the seeds of countless future conflicts. For decades, Africa was the world's supplier of raw materials and cheap labor: gold, rubber, ivory, coffee, and oil. Colonial economies were designed not to build nations, but to feed European industries. Then came independence, a wave of liberation from Cairo to Accra, from Lagos to Lusaka. The promise was freedom, dignity, and self-determination. But independence was only the beginning. The Cold War quickly turned Africa into a new battlefield, this time between the US and the Soviet Union. Coups, proxy wars, and arms deals replaced colonial chains with geopolitical ones. By the 1980s and 90s, economic crises and debt led to structural adjustment programs from the IMF and World Bank, often forcing governments to privatize services and cut public spending. The result was decades of stagnation and disillusionment. Now fast forward to the 21st century. The Cold War is over, but a new global rivalry has taken shape. And once again, Africa is at its center. Only this time, Africans have more leverage, more knowledge, and far more to say about their own destiny. Let's start with China, the most visible player on the African stage. 2 decades ago, China's presence was small. Today, it's everywhere. Building roads, airports, and railways, financing stadiums and parliaments, and training African engineers and soldiers alike. Trade between China and Africa has exploded, from $10 billion in 2000 to over $280 billion today. That's more than any other country or region in the world. China calls it win-win cooperation. Critics call it debt trap diplomacy. Chinese banks have lent more than $150 billion to African countries, much of it for infrastructure. These loans build things the West often ignored: highways, ports, power stations, but they also raise questions. Who truly benefits? For many African leaders, China is attractive because it doesn't lecture about democracy or human rights. It builds quickly, delivers results, and speaks the language of partnership, even if the fine print sometimes says otherwise. Then there's the United States, long distracted by wars in the Middle East and competition with China in Asia. Washington is now playing catch-up. In recent years, it's held U.S.-Africa Leaders Summits, promised billions in investment, and pushed new development programs like Prosper Africa. But for many Africans, America still feels distant, a partner of words more than action. Its military presence is significant. Bases in Djibouti, cooperation across the Sahel, and counter-terrorism missions. Yet on trade and infrastructure, it lags behind. What America does have is soft power. Its culture, technology, and education still inspire millions of young Africans. Companies like Google and Microsoft are expanding digital hubs in Kenya and Nigeria, while Hollywood and hip-hop continue to shape African imagination. The question is, can the U.S. move beyond military and moral rhetoric to build genuine economic partnerships on the ground? Russia. Now, let's turn to Russia, a smaller player economically, but one with growing political ambitions. Through its private military company, the Wagner Group, Russia has built influence in countries like Mali, Sudan, and the Central African Republic. In exchange for protection, it often gains access to gold mines, diamond concessions, and military contracts. Moscow presents itself as an anti-colonial friend, a partner who doesn't impose Western conditions or judgments. And that message resonates in parts of Africa still skeptical of Western promises. Russia also sells weapons, offers training, and provides disinformation campaigns that favor pro-Russian governments. Its goal is simple: win allies, disrupt Western dominance, and show that the world is no longer unipolar. Europe's story is more complicated. After centuries of exploitation, European nations now speak of equal partnership. The European Union's Global Gateway Initiative aims to rival China's Belt and Road, focusing on sustainable, values-based investments. But Europe's deeper motives are also clear. It wants to control migration, secure energy supplies, and preserve influence in its former colonies. France, for example, has lost ground in West Africa, where military juntas in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso have pushed out French troops and accused Paris of neo-colonial arrogance. Meanwhile, Germany and the EU are looking south for renewable energy, hydrogen from Namibia, solar power from Morocco. Europe wants to rebrand itself as Africa's long-term partner. But trust is harder to build than pipelines. And then there's the rest of the world, the emerging powers of the global south. India is investing heavily in digital connectivity and pharmaceuticals. Turkey is expanding construction, defense, and education partnerships. The Gulf states, especially the UAE and Saudi Arabia, are buying farmland, ports, and logistics hubs across East Africa. And Brazil is rebuilding its diplomatic ties with Lusophone Africa, like Angola and Mozambique. Each sees Africa as a strategic frontier, not just a market, but a mirror of their own rise. So what exactly is everyone competing for? This new scramble isn't about colonial borders or flags. It's about leverage, economic, technological, and political. Natural resources. Africa holds about 30% of the world's mineral wealth. From the cobalt of the Democratic Republic of Congo to the lithium of Zimbabwe and Namibia, the copper of Zambia, and the oil of Nigeria, Africa is the foundation of the world's green energy future. Without Africa, there's no electric vehicle revolution, no smartphones, no renewable grids. And as demand for clean energy materials grows, global powers are racing to lock in supply chains. But the danger remains the same. Exporting raw materials without developing local industries keeps Africa poor and dependent. Food and farmland. Africa also holds 60% of the world's uncultivated arable land, the planet's last great agricultural frontier. As climate change and food insecurity worsen, foreign investors are leasing vast tracts of African farmland. For some, it's a path to modernization. For others, it's land grabbing by another name. The challenge for Africa is to feed itself first, and then the world, on its own terms. Energy. Energy is another frontier of competition. Africa's oil and gas remain valuable, but the future lies in renewables. The continent receives some of the highest solar radiation on Earth, yet millions still live without electricity. Whoever invests in energy infrastructure, solar grids, pipelines, refineries, will shape Africa's next century. And that's why foreign powers are so eager to get in early. Markets and people. Finally, Africa's biggest resource isn't under the ground, it's above it. With 1.4 billion people and a median age of just 19, Africa is the world's youngest continent. By 2050, 1 in 4 people on Earth will be African. That's a massive consumer base, a workforce, and a cultural force. Tech startups in Lagos, Nairobi, and Kigali are solving problems that Silicon Valley ignores. from mobile banking to climate adaptation. Africa's youth are not waiting for permission. They're already building the future. Here lies the great paradox of the modern scramble. Africa is finally being recognized as essential, yet still treated as secondary. Every power claims to want partnership, but many still pursue control through loans, trade terms, or military influence. However, the balance of power is changing. African nations are learning to negotiate from strength. They can now play powers against each other. China for infrastructure, the US for tech, the Gulf for finance, extracting the best deals when possible. MAF, the African Continental Free Trade Area, launched in 2021, is a game changer. It creates the world's largest single market by number of countries, potentially unlocking trillions in trade and investment. For the first time, Africa has a real chance to trade more with itself than with outsiders. And that's a quiet revolution. A new generation of Africans is also rejecting dependency. They're less interested in aid and more focused on innovation, entrepreneurship, and education. As they often say, we don't need saving, we need fair chances. Let's look at the numbers. Africa's trade with China, $282 billion in 2023. With the European Union, $265 billion. With the United States, $45 billion. Africa's population, 1.4 billion today, projected 2.5 billion by 2050. Internet users, more than 600 million, growing faster than anywhere else. Average age, 19. These figures tell a simple story. Africa is not the future. It is the present, and the world knows it. As Kenyan economist James Shikwati once said, "We don't need aid, we need trade and trust." And Nigerian writer Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie reminds us, the danger of a single story is not that it is wrong, but that it is incomplete. Africa has always been more than the narratives told about it. It is not a land of pity or poverty, but of potential, power, and perspective. Across the continent, thinkers, artists, and entrepreneurs are pushing to tell their own stories, redefining Africa not as a problem to be solved, but as a partner to engage. This is the real horizon. A continent with the resources to power the world, the youth to redefine it, and the imagination to lead it. The new Scramble isn't about conquest. It's about control of narrative, technology, and destiny. The question is not whether Africa will be part of the future, it's how it will shape that future, and on whose terms. If Africa can unite its markets, demand fair partnerships, and invest in its people, this time, it won't be a scramble for Africa. It will be a scramble by Africa to take its rightful place in the world. This is Horizon Africa, explaining Africa beyond the headlines. If you found this story insightful, subscribe and join us as we explore the continent's most important forces, its politics, its people, its economy, and its future. Next up, the colonial borders that still divide Africa. Subscribe to Horizon Africa for more context, more clarity, and more truth.